everybody. Expat Stacker coming to you with a quick discussion topic video. Recently in the news, I saw the largest ever free trade agreement was recently signed here in the Asia Pacific region. So I thought we'd go over a quick article and discuss this. This is coming from BBC News. The free trade agreement is called RCEP. And the headline here is Asia Pacific countries form world's largest trading bloc. So let's go ahead and get right into it. I was talking with my good friend Silver Conundrum about this this morning, and I mean, I think that there's so much news coverage right now around the election and the outgoing Trump administration that maybe sometimes things like this don't get covered at all, or very just a few seconds of coverage. But this is actually really huge, so I wanted to bring it to everyone's attention because in the stacking community here we're involved with things that are affected by global economics. So let's go ahead and get right into it. 15 countries have formed the world's largest trading bloc, covering nearly a third of the global economy. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, is made up of 10 Southeast Asian countries, as well as South Korea, China, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. The pact is seen as an extension of China's influence in the region. The deal excludes the US, which withdrew from a rival Asia-Pacific trade pact in 2017. President Donald Trump pulled his country out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, shortly after taking office. Negotiations over the new RCEP deal began in 2012, and it was finally signed on Sunday on the sidelines of a meeting of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN. So, real quickly, just to discuss this part, and that's how I'm going to do this video, just read a section and then discuss. First of all, back when the Obama administration was in charge, the global economic and geopolitical strategy and focus was shifted from the Middle East, which was largely the focus of the Bush administration, to the Asia Pacific region, and that was largely to counter China's rise. And I don't know if any of you would recall, but they named that the I believe it was like the Asian pivot or the Pacific pivot or something like that. But so Obama had made this free trade agreement called the TPP, which excluded China and included the United States, Japan, Korea, and several other countries, and as well as several ASEAN nations. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations is a regional trading bloc which consists of Thailand, Vietnam, I believe Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, and several other Southeast Asian nations. And if you're not aware with the geopolitics of this region, China has been building islands, man-made islands in the South China Sea, where a lot of these Southeast Asian nations are, and trying to expand their economic influence. So they have economic activities such as fishing and natural gas extraction and other things like this in disputed territorial waters of many of these other countries, Vietnam, Philippines, and so on. So the ASEAN nations are looking out. A lot of them have a similar, socioeconomic objectives as well as socioeconomic conditions. A lot of their economies are set up in a similar fashion or complementary fashion. And so they help each other out. And some of the countries are a little bit more prominent. Indonesia, for example, is a regional powerhouse. It's really a underrated country. Thailand as well, although Thailand has a lot of domestic political turmoil, which I feel limits their ability to advance as a country. It kind of reminds me of Brazil a little bit. Vietnam, I would say, has the most potential out of those ASEAN nations, and has also so far been developing the most. They have the most room to grow, and I think I've seen a lot of progress just being in this region. So anyway, the TPP, as far as I know, the Trump administration did pull out of that after Trump took office, and Japan tried to pick up the reins on that and sort of lead the TPP. Japan is one of the, maybe one of two traditional powerhouses in Asia, the other being China. But Japan has a controversial history, we'll just put it that way, of colonialism and conquest and atrocities, frankly, during World War II. And unlike Germany, the way that Japan has handled a lot of that history is controversial, yeah, to say the least. They haven't acknowledged certain things and haven't tried to make reparations for them. They don't educate their population about that history as well as some of the neighbors would like. And there is also a lot of territorial disputes between Japan and its neighbors, including Russia, Korea, and several other countries. So Japan is also, not everyone's favorite in the region. And so I think that the TPP really didn't, without the United States at the helm, did not really have a lot of hope to progress. Now, many of you have probably heard of President Xi Jinping of China's Belt and Road Initiative. And this is that's more Western focused through the Middle East and Africa, and but this is more Northeast and Southeast Asian Eastern focused, with China sort of at the middle. So that's why it says that this pact is seen as an extension of China's influence in the region, and the United States, frankly, withdrew from it. So those are just the facts. I know that free trade can be controversial, not only in the U.S., in many countries around the world, but that's basically the backstory here for the situation, and they have been negotiating it for quite a long time. So let's read a little bit more about it. So this part says, why is it important? The RCEP isn't as comprehensive and doesn't cut tariffs as deeply as the TPP's successor, but many analysts think the RCEP's sheer size makes it more significant. Its membership includes a larger group of nations, notably reflecting the membership of China, which considerably boosts the GDP of RCEP's members, according to Rajiv Biswas, Asia Pacific chief economist for analyst firm IHS Markit. While China already has a number of bilateral trade agreements, this is the first time it has signed up to a regional multilateral trade pact. That is a very big deal. Okay, China is a little bit notorious for kind of doing things the way that they want to do them, but that's going to be much more difficult to do with multilateral trade agreements, presumably. And it's also the first time that China, Japan, and Korea, which are the three largest economies in Asia, have come together in an agreement of any kind. And it also includes Australia and New Zealand, which I think isn't really, it's mentioned here, but I don't think that the significance or the importance of that is mentioned here. Currently, China and Australia have been having some very frosty relations, to say the least. But, with this, it can really help to move past that kind of thing. And again, it legitimizes China. It elevates China's position in the region. Okay, so let's continue reading. Why do members want this deal? For starters, leaders hope the pact will help to spur recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. Under the current global circumstances, the fact that RCEP has been signed after 8 years of negotiation brings a ray of light and hope amid the clouds, said Chinese Premier Li Keqiang. I think that's the pronunciation, but I don't know. Longer term, Mr. Lee described the agreement as a victory of multilateralism and free trade. Again, that's very counter to the narrative and focus of the Trump administration. They were more focused on renegotiating multilateral free trade agreements and trying to do them in a bilateral or maybe trilateral fashion, but a lot less of the typical multilateral type deals. So this is going in the other direction. India was also part of the negotiations, but it pulled out last year over concerns that lower tariffs could hurt local producers. So that might be one reason, but the other reason is that the other major economy in Asia is India, and they and China have been having a lot of difficult problems recently. So signatories of the deal said the door remained open for India to join in the future. Members of the RCEP make up nearly a third of the world's population and account for 29% of the global GDP. The new free trade bloc will be bigger than both the US, Mexico, Canada agreement and the EU. So let me say that again. This RCEP FTA is bigger than NAFTA, or whatever it's called now, and the EU. Okay, so this is the biggest FTA bloc in the world now. So that's why this is such a huge deal and such a huge issue, and I wanted to bring it to your guys' attention. All right, now here we have some analysis. What will RCEP do? Analysis by Tim McDonald, BBC News Singapore. The RCEP is expected to eliminate a range of tariffs on imports within 20 years. So it's a gradual reduction of tariffs. The reason that's necessary is because of the different strengths of the economies and the different positions of their development. If they eliminated the tariffs right away, it would cause too big of an economic shock. So they're going to gradually draw that down over 20 years. It also includes provisions on intellectual property, which is a huge deal, especially for a lot of Asian economies like Japan and South Korea and China. Telecommunications, financial services, e-commerce, and professional services. Now, a lot of those ASEAN countries, those Southeast Asian countries, some of them, such as like Cambodia, for example, they still have like dirt floors in the classrooms. So, one thing that's very different about Asia, if you ever come to one of the more developed countries, like some of the cities in China or Japan, or especially in South Korea, you'll notice right away how the internet is everywhere, how everyone uses their phone for everything, financial services and shopping online. And in China especially, they use QR codes for a lot of stuff. But I've made some videos in the past talking about central bank backed digital currencies and also the prospects of a one world currency. And I think that would be too difficult to achieve overnight. So they're gonna have to do it in a step-by-step process, and this would be, in my opinion, one of the next steps toward that is making this Asian free trade zone, and after that, putting in infrastructure in places like Cambodia, because if they have dirt classrooms and they don't have the internet there, then you're global central bank digital currency isn't going to work very well. So this free trade zone and area in Asia allows for the development of those developing or underdeveloped countries, so that they can put in the infrastructure to have a regional digital currency that can work to that effect. So I think that's very significant. Intellectual property is another one IP is becoming more and more the asset of certain companies. So some companies like Samsung Electronics, for example, but many others as well. So okay, let's continue reading. But it's possible the new rules of origin, which officially define where a product comes from, will have the biggest impact, blah, blah, blah. This is just talking about reducing tariffs. If you'd like, I'll leave a link in the description. You can read the rest of this part, but I don't think this particular part is that interesting. Okay, let's jump down to, it says, who is likely to benefit? So the Peterson Institute for International Economics estimates that the deal could increase global national income by 186 billion annually by 2030. That's obviously, less than a decade away, and that's pretty huge. And add 0.2% to the economy of its member states. However, some analysts think that the deal is likely to benefit China, Japan, and South Korea more than other member states. The economic benefits of the deal might only be marginal for Southeast Asia, but there are some interesting trade and tariff dynamics to watch for Northeast Asia, said Nick Moreau at the Economist Intelligence Unit. But it could be some time before any country sees the benefits because 6 ASEAN nations and 3 other nations have to ratify it before it takes effect. Mr. Moreau thinks it could be a slow process. Ratification will likely be tricky in national parliaments owing to both anti-trade and anti-China sentiment. So that is the major caveat of this story, which is that the countries have agreed on the terms. Now they need to individually ratify it within each of their country, in their domestic governments. And as I was just saying before, countries like China, Japan, South Korea, who already have these developed, highly developed economies, or even Australia, New Zealand, according to this analysis, they're likely to benefit a little bit more than the developing countries. That can quite often be the case, but I think that depending on how the economies are constructed within each individual nation, it can also be destructive for developed countries. We've seen what's happened to the manufacturing base, for example, in the United States. Maybe some of that is starting to come back as things get so desperate, but there's been a generation or two that has suffered massively because of that. I mean, when NAFTA, I was a kid when NAFTA was getting, negotiated and agreed on, but I still have researched it and I still remember some of what they were saying. Oh yeah, we're going to retrain the factory workers to work in call centers and then blah, 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 blah. So don't worry, you might get paid a little bit less, but you'll still have a great job, and, don't worry about your pension, blah, 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 blah. And then they shipped those call centers over to India, and, a Walmart opened up, and the people who used to have a career working at an assembly line or a factory or some type of manufacturing facility, and then had to go work in a call center, now ended up working at Walmart, for starvation wages. So it can work out really badly depending on how your economy is structured and set up. And also, as the end of this says here, ratification could be tricky. So I also wonder, because obviously Biden's been elected, and he and the Obama administration were part of, they made the TPP. So since all the countries have agreed in principle to the RCEP, but they have to ratify it in their domestic governments, I wonder if the United States will try to sabotage those efforts or persuade them to rejoin TPP or something like that. I wouldn't put it past the United States government to do such a thing, but I don't know maybe how successful that would be or not. But this is really huge, guys. This is going to be bigger than the EU, bigger than NAFTA or anything like that. And it says this is basically 1/3 of the world's economy, and China obviously has the world's largest population, and there's a ton of other countries with really strong economies. So this is gigantic, and it definitely will have effects and impacts that people in the United States feel, that people in Europe feel. So I because of the Trump administrations, the US was the world's lone superpower, and you could argue militarily it still is, but in terms of diplomacy and business and economics and stuff, I don't see it that way anymore. The Trump administration took a different path, and I think that countries, they got tired of it. The Paris Climate Agreement, the Iran deal, the TPP, for example, whether you're for those things or against those things, it doesn't matter. You might think it's a good thing that we got out of those deals or avoided the TPP. You might think it's a bad thing. It doesn't matter what your opinion is on it. That's what happened. And I believe that a lot of other countries, specifically Asian countries, they kind of got sick and tired of, waiting on the U.S. to cooperate or fulfill their promises or and it's not just those three examples either, guys. There are a lot of examples of that sort of thing where the U.S. has made some kind of agreement and I mean, all the countries do it. But when you're the superpower, you're the lone superpower of the world, it carries a little bit more weight when you don't follow through on what you say you're going to do. So I've seen, with the EU and with, there's also an African Union and, the BRICS. I don't know if you've heard of BRICS, but that's another trading bloc, economic bloc. And then there's this RCEP. So I see that there is more of a multi-pronged approach with less U.S. leadership in the world. Although the United States still has the strongest military by far. That's not the only thing that has to be considered. So China is rising, and this is definitely going to have long lasting effects for several generations if it gets fully up and running. But this is a major step in that direction. So this is not insignificant. And I believe that, you should put this on your radar. It could mean big things. They're talking in this article about spurring, economic recovery after the coronavirus. I've said, and I've been saying, I continue to say, even before the coronavirus, infrastructure projects are going to be taking place, and a whole lot more. So it could mean a lot for precious metals and global economic markets. And Asia, frankly, is where a lot of the growth is happening right now and a lot of the potential. So this just facilitates that and acts as an accelerant for that. So we'll see what happens. I hope you found this interesting. It doesn't have any direct or immediate impacts for precious metals, but I don't know how much on people's radar it is, but it really should be, because it is so, the sheer size of this is just, definitely going to have a global impact. So let me know what you think about this story and what you think it might mean for the global economy and what it might mean for the US economy as well as for precious metals. All right, guys, looking forward to hearing your thoughts. This is Expat Stacker, and I'll catch you on the flip side.